Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Your Number One Fan podcast. I am here with my first ever guest. I'm so excited. It is Lynne Ricketts. She is
Hi,
my
everyone.
middle school, my middle school best friend turned mom best friend. It's so fun to do all this together, and it is just right to have her as my first guest. We're going to talk about being a mom and how kind of she got to being a mom and a stay-at-home mom who she still works part-time, and just talk more about the identity thing with being a mom, how things have changed, her views of where she was before being a mom. So a lot of it'll center around being a mom, but I think even if you're not a parent, you can take something from this episode for sure. So Lynne, what do you want to say about kind of your journey to being a mom?
So, I have two beautiful girls. I have a 5-year-old named Madeline and a 2-year-old named Olivia. They are my pride and joy. I center my whole life around them, even though I really need to, have some time for me.
Yeah.
So when I was pregnant with Madeline, I was working as a OBGYN, nursing. They called me a nurse there, but it was kind of like a doctor's tech type deal. I worked under a doctor. I worked there my whole pregnancy. It was pretty cool to be pregnant and working in an OBGYN office.
Yeah.
Had a lot of questions answered that I needed answered. And then I had Madeline. And about 4 months after I had Madeline, my husband was given an opportunity of a new job that allowed me to stay home. So we had a long discussion about whether or not I should, quit in the whole nursing field and become a stay-at-home mom. And obviously, I chose that. I had a midwife there. A lot of people kind of tried to talk me out of it and say, "Oh no, stay at work. You're going to get drained after the first year." But the midwife, a midwife that I hold near and dear to my heart, said to me, "One day when you look back on life, you're never going to say, 'Man, I wish I worked more.'" She said, "You're going to look back and say, 'Man, I wish I spent more time with my kids.'"
Hmm.
So I kind of took that route, and
Yeah.
I've been a stay-at-home mom since.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of people have that kind of discussion with their partner. Like, if you do this, I have to do this or whatever. So it's good that at least you were ready to take on that new role. And
It was hard, because, we kinda split finances both ways before I was when I was
Mhm.
working, and then afterwards, I'm like I almost felt like I needed to get permission, like, "Can I buy this or can I do this?" And the one day he
Yeah.
sat me down, he was like, "Listen," he said, "Your job now is to be a mom, and you're saving us so much money by staying at home so we don't have to pay for childcare." He was like, "You need to stop asking me if you can buy
Yeah.
stuff." He said, "It's okay."
Yeah.
So that
That's
was a hard transition, but I
yeah.
got through it.
Yeah, I think I mean, I resonate with that a lot because I took a step back when I was pregnant and now that I have my son, and it is hard, especially if you really liked what you were doing before. I'm obviously still trying to work and find what I want to do. Um, but Steve is definitely my husband is definitely the one that takes over, all of that now. He's kind of stepped forward, I should say, instead of it being equal. So I understand like what you mean about the finances, and it's something that you don't really think about, and you don't it's almost like I never thought it would feel awkward with him, and then now it kind of is because I always was the same way.
I think as long as you lay out the foundation of, okay, I am staying at home. This is what my job is. This is what I need to do for the kids or the child. And then just to really lay out that foundation of, okay, I need to do this and you need to do this. And it's not that one of us isn't working, we're both contributing. It's just one might be contributing financially as the other is contributing more within the house and within the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a whole separate discussion in itself, how much work and how much money you can save having like a stay-at-home mom.
It
It's
really is.
it's actually crazy. I can't remember the exact like statistics of it. I should have looked it up, but it was something like 100 grand maybe you save by having like a stay-at-home mom with two kids.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that
And
might not be right,
that is
but
actually no shade to working moms because
no,
phew,
no.
it would be I still have trouble thinking about next year when Madeline goes to school. Okay, I'm gonna have more free time. I only have to figure out what to do with my youngest. So do
Yeah.
I put her in a daycare? Do I put her in that and then start to work? it's yeah, and I don't even know if I want to handle that.
I feel like a lot of us, like, regardless if you're a stay-at-home mom, if you're not, like, you have these times where, like, you're not sure what you should be doing the next year. You might be in a different spot than you are now, or you can even imagine where you would be, like, a year from now. So and that's kind of the whole premise of this podcast is kind of finding what you want to do following that, and it's okay if, like, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, your
And
path
I
isn't always gonna be flat. It's there's gonna have bumps and
Yep,
curves, and you just have to learn how to kinda roll with that path, and, I mean, that's kind of how motherhood has been for me in general. You know,
yeah.
my journey of motherhood hasn't been necessarily easy, and
Mhm.
I feel like when I went into motherhood and I jumped into motherhood, I'm gonna be the first to admit that I thought it kind of looked easy and that I was gonna nail it right off the start. But whew, I was in for a rude awakening with that.
Yeah. When you decided to, like, step back from the job that you had, were you conflicted about, like, stopping working altogether? Or were you like, "Okay, I can go down hours," or were you just ready to kinda jump into that, like, new
I
role?
was I was ready to jump into the role, but it was kind of bittersweet in an aspect because that job was my dream job. I loved working with OBGYN. I loved working with pregnant patients. I loved working the GYN aspect of it. So it was pretty hard to leave that job. But then again, I knew that Madeline was my first priority that I needed to focus on.
Right.
So I really needed to focus on her. I needed to find my path in motherhood, and kind of, put work on the back burner because I did struggle a lot postpartum with postpartum depression and anxiety with Madeline. And I'm kind of glad I did take that step back because I would have struggled with everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I would have struggled with work. I would have struggled with my home life and getting, the chores that I need to do around the house and how to be a mom. So it was really best that I stepped back, and I'm glad that it worked out that way.
Yeah, me too. I'm so happy that you're happy with where you're at right now.
I
As
am.
somebody who is a mother, went through pregnancy twice, and worked at like an actual OBGYN office, what do you think about the support that women get throughout pregnancy and then after having the baby?
So I worked for a doctor that was from not around in this country,
Okay.
and she's from a different country. And one day we sat down and we really talked about like the postpartum leave that they had versus what we had, and that was a big thing. So when I was, working in that OBGYN office, my postpartum leave, mind you, I had a C-section with my first. My postpartum leave was only 8 weeks.
Ugh.
And so I remember I believe I took 10 weeks. I asked if I could extend it and they were okay with that. But I remember, like, how am I going to give my 8-week-old baby or 10-week-old baby or even 12-week-old baby to someone to watch when that should be like my nurturing job? So I think honestly that the whole even postpartum like experience right now in America is just awful. I really do.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then throughout pregnancy and even, like I said, postpartum, I think there needs to be an increased amount of support no matter what. I think
Absolutely.
our country is, I don't know what this exact statistic is, but we have also the most post, what is it, delivery? Um,
Mortalities,
yeah,
yeah.
mortality in
Yeah.
birth and afterwards. And,
Yep.
you know,
By far.
I've yeah, by far. And it's very scary to see and it's very sad to see because America has honestly come so far with certain things in its time, um, that mothers just seem to be on the back burner.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I remember leaving the hospital and no one ever showed me how to strap my daughter into a car seat. I had to teach myself that.
Yeah.
I remember breastfeeding was really big on my list. I had a lactation consultant come in and kept calling my daughter a he
Ugh.
and didn't even look at our chart or come in and help. I was freshly out of a C-section, and my dad finally stood up for me because he was in the room at the time. And he said, "It is a girl. You are not helping her situation.
Mhm.
Um, you should be here to support her, to help her breastfeed, to learn to teach her to breastfeed, and you're doing nothing but irritating her right now." So he asked her to kindly leave.
Yeah.
So that kind of was a big eye opening as well, where, there's something that I wanted to do so bad of breastfeeding, and I had no education on it. I
Yeah.
had no postpartum support on it. And then, you go into the hospital, you have your baby, and you're like, now what? Okay, I have this baby. Like, I go to her pediatrician's office, 2 weeks after, a week after, whatever. But like, all my questions are like, okay, is this normal? Is
Yeah.
this normal? How do I put her in a car seat? How do I get her, like, what bottles do I use? How do I
Right.
make a bottle?
Right. Yeah.
No one teaches you this stuff. You kind of have to
Mhm.
teach yourself. And I mean, there was parenting classes, but a lot of parenting classes nowadays, granted, I had her before COVID, but with my second, there was no, and for you with your son as well, COVID hit and they really kind
Yeah.
of took parenting classes away.
Yeah.
So it was a very scary transition.
I feel like even if you do take all of the classes in the beginning, it's more about like once it's happening, either you blank and completely forget everything you learned, or it's just hard to take in anything before you don't know what you don't know. So,
You don't,
you
and
know,
nothing is textbook straight either.
right,
Like, no
exactly.
baby is textbook straight. Like, Madeline suffered from colic. I remember taking her in at, like, I think her 2-month appointment and telling the pediatrician, like, something is up with her. And he was like, nothing's up with her. And what do you mean something's up with her? I said, she does not sleep. And I thought, I was under the impression that you bring home this baby and they slept.
Yeah.
Like, everyone talks about newborns and how much they sleep. No, she did nothing but screamed the entire time. And I think that's a lot of where my postpartum depression and anxiety came from, is because you don't meet with the pediatricians before you have the baby. They come in after you have the baby. You pick your pediatrician, they come in, they meet you, they discharge you from the hospital, and then you go see them however long after.
Mhm.
And no one tells you about, like, okay, this is a normal part of what your baby's going to do. If they have colic, this is what you need to do. You
Mhm.
feed them sitting up or burp them extra. No one tells you that stuff. So when you go in the first few weeks of being a parent and your baby has done nothing but scream, do you feel like a failure?
Exactly. Mhm. Yeah, and you almost feel like you're bothering them, which I know now, like, you've been there for me a lot, and you've told me at this point, you're like, "Okay, like, kid number 2 and being you've gone through so much, you're like, they're there for that," and it really helps. Um,
Yeah. I always say you're paying them, you hired them, they're paying, they're charging for your insurance and stuff.
yeah,
So call them if you have a question.
right.
I always err on the side of caution when it comes to my
Mhm.
children. Like, even if they have a snuffy nose, I'm always
Yeah.
calling, or
Yeah.
like, is this normal? Is this normal? And I
Yeah.
feel like there's nothing wrong with that, because there's
Yeah.
no handbook that prepares you for parenthood.
Okay, we just had to take a quick break because my son was crying and screaming bloody murder, but we're back. So, on the topic of not being taken care of postpartum, did you feel like you lost like a part of yourself, or how did it really feel if you can remember back? Because that's years ago, like right when you had your first daughter, what did you think, when you really got into it, when you maybe like a month or two in, like how did you feel? Do you remember?
Yeah, I definitely lost a big part of myself. And even 5 years later, I'm still trying to find myself. Um, but I remember someone saying, and I don't remember who exactly it was, someone said to me, when you walk through those doors, of labor and delivery, you walk in as Lynn or my husband Sam. Um, and you walk in as that. And when you walk out of those doors, you're now mom and dad. You're not Lynn and Sam anymore. Yes, you'll always
Mhm.
be Lynn and Sam, but your new role is mom and dad. And someone told me that, and I kind of really like thought about it. I'm like, oh no, I'll always be myself. I'll always be Lynn. I'm more than just a mom. Like, I'll always be more than just a mom, although that's my favorite role. Um,
Right.
but boy, was that person right, whoever said that.
Mhm.
It was right,
Yeah.
because your whole life turns upside down. You now have to care for this child. You have to keep this child alive. You have to feed it. You have to, burp it. You have to make sure it's sleeping and keep it alive. And I do feel like I lost a big part of myself. And I think that that was a part kind of my postpartum anxiety that I had, was, okay, I just had this baby. I can't leave as I want to leave anymore. What happens if I go in the store and she starts crying? Are people going to look at me